The last thing I would want is to fall into the trap of deflection away from the important stories and important subjects that need attention. Not that the Boston Massacre, PSYOP, false flag, and all its complications and distractions, and the Jodi Arias murder trial and all the other mainstream media attentions don't have validity to look into, of course. The only real truth there is when you have someone like Jodi Arias, who clearly murdered her husband, not in self-defense. I mean, she shot him a whole bunch of times, stabbed him, almost cut his head off, stabbed him like 15 times. That's not self-defense. That's a rage killing. I'm sure she'll get her due, and we'll find out, since the jury is out on that at this point in time. There's some truth. But what truth do we have from the bombings and all the other false flag events in history is occulted truth, hidden truth. But one of the most important factors that we've had in the last several weeks is a deflection away from our economic problems and our economic woes and the financial situation. I'm sure you'll all agree that this is true. There is a secret FDIC plan to loot our bank accounts, as they did in Cyprus. What happened in Cyprus recently in the financial meltdown, where they took, in some cases, 25% of people's bank accounts to keep the economy going, to keep the government going, to keep the businesses, I guess, flowing, the business flowing through that country. The individuals had to take this hit. Again, it's a fleecing, it's a stealing, it's robbery, it's the New World Order in action, and it's coming to America. I tell you, it's coming. Personally, I hold no money other than a checking account in banks, nor do I hold any more securities. The wealth of this nation is being taken away, as is the wealth of the majority of the middle class of the world. Only a fool who just doesn't want to believe that will accept the lies. There is no way out of this. $16 trillion of debt moving to 17. Unfunded liabilities over $220 trillion. A crumbling infrastructure, roads and bridges. There's no money to do the changes and the efforts that could have been put into place over the last 4 years that Obama didn't. Instead of investing in our infrastructure, our roads and bridges and tunnels that are all falling apart, and our electrical infrastructure, which is archaic, and other aspects that we could do to improve the common man by giving jobs, good-paying jobs, our president is working for the elite's purpose to deindustrialize our country, and instead just spent millions of dollars, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, what am I saying? Giving money to failing opportunities like Solyndra and all of these green, quote-unquote, green companies. This is criminal. You know, I just watched a really excellent documentary on All the President's Men Revisited with Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, who, of course, was the force behind having that movie made. And it looked back at Watergate, and then I watched a couple of Watergate documentaries and some of the actual Watergate congressional hearings, and you can see clearly that nothing's changed. This is the same thing that was going on before Watergate, and they got caught, that's going on after Watergate, and to this day. This nepotism, control, abuse of power exists. In fact, since the EPA was created by Nixon, you had FEMA created by Carter. All these executive powers increased since then and have never been rescinded by any president. In fact, they increase more. So it brings the office of president closer and closer to a dictatorship or a office of pure power that will not need the authorization of Congress or anyone else. But of course, that's against the Constitution, and that's what we patriots are fighting for, a restoration of our republic to a constitutional government. But sometimes it's good to look back in time. Like, let's look back at Nixon a little bit. Let's look back at Watergate and how evil and corrupt our own government is, and loyal to the criminals in chief.
Of all the tapes, a recording from June 23, 1972 is the most devastating. The press labels it the smoking gun because it proves that the president obstructed justice 6 days after the break-in.
It's very detrimental to have this thing going further. This involves these Cubans and a lot of candy paint.
In a meeting on that day with his chief of staff, Nixon says that an FBI investigation would expose the burglars, since 4 of them are former CIA agents involved in the failed 1961 Bay of Pigs operation in Cuba. Nixon tells Haldeman to call CIA Director Richard Helms and persuade the agency to halt the FBI probe using a cover story. In this conversation, the President of the United States is telling his chief of staff to interfere with the Watergate investigation. This is a clear violation of the law.
This is sort of a comedy of errors, bizarre and without getting into it. The president's going to believe this is going to open the whole Bay of Pigs thing up again.
But CIA Director Helms refuses to go along with Nixon's plan. July 27th. The House Judiciary Committee passes an article of impeachment against the president for obstruction of justice. Within 3 days, Congress passes 2 more articles of impeachment, one for abuse of power and another for contempt of Congress.
Mr. Dryden.
Aye.
Mr. Rangel.
Aye.
The full House is scheduled to address the articles in 2 weeks. With the threat of impeachment looming, what is the president's state of mind? 9 days later, on August 8, 1974, Nixon addresses the nation.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
I know many people believe that Nixon did great things. He had Henry Kissinger at his side, Memorandum 200, the Club of Rome, the depopulation plans for the United Nations, the China model, opening the doors to China, where his good buddy David Rockefeller said, well, Mao Zedong is one of the greatest leaders in history. He killed 60 million of his own people, but he's one of the greatest leaders in history. Read it, The China Traveler. David Rockefeller. It's unbelievable.
In their 1991 book, these researchers claim to have found data showing that this agency was looking for an inexpensive and effective drug to control the populations of foreign countries that the government had classified as underdeveloped. The abortion pill was to be tested in these environments, and if successful, the plan called for it to then be introduced into Black, Hispanic, and Native American communities in the United States.
In 1977, only 3 years after NSSM 200 was issued, the director of the United States Office of Population, Dr. Reimert T. Ravenholt, publicly stated that it was the U.S. government's intention to sterilize 1/4 of the world's female population. According to Ravenholt, one of the driving forces behind this campaign was the need to protect American financial and commercial interests.
Ravenholt said that some foreign governments were refusing to give the United States permission to come into their country and control their population. He said that, in those cases, the plan was to be carried out by 2 private organizations with an enormous amount of financial support from the American government. When asked by a St. Louis newspaper to name the two organizations, he said that they were the United Nations Fund for Population Activities and Planned Parenthood.
The New World Order is all about controlling resources and depopulation. We need to have less fossil fuels and less pollution. But these criminals are the ones that make the pollution and are involved with the fossil fuels that are telling you that you shouldn't do this. Understand that. It's very important to understand that. It is the control. It is, again, the Hegelian dialectic. They create the problem and then they offer the solution. Well, we got to do something about this. And we know what to do. Carbon taxes to pay to the Rothschild Bank for global warming fraud. The monies that are spent to bring us into deindustrialization, to take jobs away from Americans, not to create jobs. Obama's done nothing to create one job. He has done nothing to help the industries, as I said, to build the roads and bridges. He speaks of it now. All of these things that he's done are the opposite to the things that he's said. So, once again, he will speak about fixing the infrastructure, the roads and bridges and the electrical infrastructure, but nothing will get done. And he'll blame Congress, and Congress is just as much to blame as he is, because they're all in the pockets of these industrialists, these internationalists, intent upon bringing in a world government. And the way they'll do it is by strangling America to the point where she can't breathe, and will do anything to release the grip of poverty and hunger and fear that this collapse will bring. And it is coming. Make no mistake about it. This is not fear-mongering. It is a fact. It's an unsustainable number. And these bankers are going to claim that they need to be bailed out or the world's going to come to an end, and they'll bail us out, and we'll bail them out again for the next crisis, which will probably be the student loan defaults and debt, since these kids can't pay their loans because they get out of school and there's no jobs. They have $100,000, $200,000 in debt. Wake up, America. Our best days are ahead, but only if we see the road in front of us.